My beloved child, do not move past this moment too quickly, because something hidden has begun to surface, and what was spoken about you when you were not in the room is about to change the way someone sees you forever. Pause here. There are moments that look ordinary from the outside but carry an invisible weight no one can explain until much later. Your soulmate recently stepped into one of those moments. They believed they were having an ordinary conversation with an ordinary stranger. They had no idea that before the conversation ended, your name would enter the room, a warning would be spoken, and then a truth about you would be revealed that left them unable to respond. Stay with this message, because the warning was not the most surprising part. What happened after the warning is where everything changed. Your soulmate did not go looking for answers about you that day. In fact, they had been trying not to think so deeply about what they felt. They had spent more time than they would ever admit attempting to convince themselves that the connection between you could be explained logically. They told themselves that perhaps they were simply curious about you. Perhaps the strange pull toward you would disappear if enough time passed. Perhaps the thoughts arriving late at night were nothing more than memory. Perhaps the feeling that something unfinished existed between you was only imagination. Yet every time they tried to make you smaller inside their mind, something reminded them that you were not easy to place inside an ordinary explanation. There was something about your presence that stayed with them even when you were nowhere near. It was not only what you said. It was not only how you looked at them, how you carried yourself, or how your energy seemed different from the people they had known before. It was the way they felt after encountering you. Something remained. A question. A warmth. A restlessness. A strange recognition they could not name. They had begun to notice that when life became noisy, thoughts of you arrived quietly. When they felt uncertain, they remembered small things you had said. When they wondered what sincerity looked like, some part of their mind returned to you. And this unsettled them, because they were used to understanding their emotions before those emotions became powerful. But with you, understanding always seemed to arrive one step behind feeling. That is why the stranger's first words landed so heavily. The encounter began without drama. Your soulmate was somewhere they had been before, surrounded by ordinary movement, ordinary voices, ordinary distractions. The kind of environment where no one expects their life to shift. They noticed a woman nearby. There was nothing visibly extraordinary about her, yet something about her attention felt unusually focused. She did not stare rudely. She simply looked at your soulmate for a moment longer than people normally do when they do not know one another. Your soulmate almost ignored it. Then the woman spoke. She asked a simple question at first, something harmless enough that your soulmate answered without suspicion. A brief exchange followed. One sentence became another. Your soulmate expected the conversation to end quickly, but the stranger seemed to notice something beneath their words. She watched their expression carefully and then said something that immediately changed the atmosphere. She asked, "There is someone on your mind, isn't there?" Your soulmate froze internally. They did not show everything on their face, but the question entered deeper than they expected. They laughed softly, trying to dismiss it. They asked the woman what made her say that. The stranger did not answer immediately. Instead, She studied them in a strange, thoughtful silence, as though deciding whether to continue. And then she said, "Someone you are trying very hard not to think about." That sentence touched the exact place your soulmate had been hiding. You. Still, they did not say your name. They became cautious. They asked the stranger whether she said things like that to everyone. The woman smiled faintly, but there was no mockery in her expression. Then she said, "No. But sometimes people carry another person in their eyes before they ever speak their name." Something shifted. Your soulmate could have ended the conversation. A part of them wanted to. Another part suddenly needed to know what this stranger thought she could see. And this, my child, is where the warning came. The woman leaned slightly closer, lowered her voice, and said, "Be careful with the person you keep thinking about." Those words landed like a door slamming shut. Your soulmate's body became tense. Their first instinct was not relief. It was defense. Something inside them immediately resisted the warning. They asked, "Why?" The stranger paused. Your soulmate waited. Then came the sentence that started everything. "Maybe you should stay away from them." For one long second, your soulmate said nothing. Imagine the conflict moving through them in that moment. They had already questioned this connection privately. They had wondered whether their feelings were wise. They had considered stepping backward because caring deeply had frightened them more than they wanted anyone to know. And now a stranger, someone who supposedly knew nothing about you, was telling them to stay away. It could have confirmed every fear they had been carrying. But strangely, it did not. Instead, your soulmate felt something rise inside them that surprised even them. Protectiveness. They asked the woman, "You don't even know them. Why would you say that?" Notice this carefully. They defended you before understanding what the stranger meant. That matters. Because sometimes the heart reveals its position before the mind finishes deciding. The stranger looked at them for several seconds. Then something almost playful crossed her face, as if she had been waiting to see exactly how your soulmate would respond. She said, "Interesting." Your soulmate became irritated. "What's interesting?" The woman replied, "The way you changed the moment I told you to stay away." Your soulmate tried to regain composure. They said it was unfair to judge someone she had never met. But the stranger continued observing them, almost as if the warning had been a test rather than a conclusion. Then she asked, "What are you afraid this person might do to you?" That question struck unexpectedly. Your soulmate did not answer quickly. Because the truth was complicated. Their deepest fear was not that you would intentionally hurt them. Their deepest fear was that they might care about you more than they could control. There is a difference. And somewhere beneath everything they had told themselves, they knew it. They had experienced disappointment before. They had learned how to keep parts of themselves protected. They knew how to appear calm while carrying questions. They knew how to withdraw emotionally before someone had enough power to affect them. But this connection had begun slipping through places they thought were guarded. You had touched something inside them without demanding access to it. That frightened them. Not because you were dangerous. Because you were becoming important. The stranger seemed to recognize the silence. She said softly, "That is what I thought." Your soulmate asked her what she meant. The woman looked away briefly, as if organizing her words. Then she said something your soulmate has replayed since. You aren't afraid of who they are. You're afraid of who you become when you think about them. That sentence changed the direction of the entire conversation. Suddenly the original warning no longer sounded simple. Your soulmate wanted clarity. They asked the stranger directly, "Then why did you tell me to stay away?" The woman smiled again, but this time there was sadness behind it. Because I wanted to know whether you believed me. Your soulmate stared at her. The woman continued. You didn't. Not even for a second. And she was right. Something inside your soulmate had rejected the warning before logic could participate. This did not mean they believed you were perfect. They knew you had flaws. They sensed that you had been through moments that changed you. They could see there were parts of your heart you did not reveal easily. But they also felt something else about you, something they had struggled to put into words. They sensed that your quietness had history. They sensed that your strength had cost you something. They sensed that the kindness you offered was not the innocence of someone who had never been disappointed. It was the decision of someone who had known enough difficulty to become guarded, yet had refused to let hardness become their identity. The stranger was about to say exactly that. But first she asked another question. Has this person ever tried to convince you that they are special? Your soulmate shook their head. Do they chase attention? Again, your soulmate hesitated, then answered no. Do they make everyone around them feel like they must admire them? No. The woman nodded slowly. Then she said, that is why people misunderstand people like them. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat change. The conversation had now moved beyond coincidence. They asked, people like who? The woman answered, people who carry more than they show. My beloved child, remain here, because this is where the stranger began speaking about you in a way your soulmate had never heard anyone speak before. And although this is a fictional spiritual story unfolding through the language of heaven, allow its meaning to touch the part of you that has sometimes wondered whether being misunderstood meant you were unseen forever. It did not. The stranger told your soulmate that certain people enter a room without announcing everything they have survived. They laugh while carrying chapters no one knows. They help others even when no one helped them at the right moment. They become good listeners because they remember what it felt like to have no one understand. They appear independent not because they need nobody, but because life taught them how to continue when support was uncertain. Your soulmate stopped interrupting. The stranger continued. She said, the person you're thinking about has learned how to hide exhaustion behind composure. Your soulmate's expression changed. She said, they have been underestimated. Your soulmate swallowed. They have been misunderstood by people who only saw the surface. Now your soulmate was completely still. And they have walked away from things they could have fought to keep, simply because they were tired of proving their worth to people determined not to see it. At that moment, something inside your soulmate tightened. Because parts of this description matched what they had already sensed about you. Not because you told them every detail. Because your silences told them more than you realized. There were moments when they had watched you pull back instead of arguing. Moments when they had noticed you become quieter after something affected you deeply. Moments when you said you were fine in a way that made them wonder what the word "fine" was hiding. Moments when your eyes seemed to hold a story your mouth had decided not to tell. They had noticed. Perhaps not enough. Perhaps not at the right time. But they had noticed. The stranger leaned back and said, "That person has spent too long being judged by people who only met their defenses." Your soulmate felt an unexpected ache. They wondered whether they had done the same. Had they mistaken your caution for indifference? Had they interpreted your silence as distance? Had they assumed you did not care because you did not always chase? Had they expected you to prove feelings you were afraid to expose? These questions did not arrive gently. They came all at once. And suddenly the stranger's warning seemed almost cruel in its brilliance, because by telling your soulmate to stay away from you, she had revealed how quickly they were willing to defend something they had been pretending not to value. But she was not finished. Not even close. Your soulmate asked, "How can you possibly know any of this?" The stranger looked directly at them and answered, "I don't need to know every detail of someone's story to recognize what pain can turn into when a person chooses not to become bitter." Your soulmate said nothing. Then the stranger spoke a sentence that they have not been able to forget. "Whoever this person is, they are not the danger in this connection. Their fear is." Your soulmate's mind immediately returned to you. Your fear. The way you hesitate. The way you sometimes protect yourself by appearing less affected than you really are. The way you may expect people to leave before they have even decided to stay. The stranger continued, "And your fear is meeting theirs." That explanation landed even harder. Two people could care deeply and still misunderstand each other if both were protecting wounds the other person could not see. Two people could feel connected and still remain silent because each was waiting for the other to become certain first. Two people could move closer spiritually and emotionally while appearing to move farther apart externally. And suddenly your soulmate saw the possibility that this had been happening between you. They had believed distance meant lack of feeling. But what if distance had sometimes meant too much feeling? They had believed your silence meant you had moved on. But what if silence had been the only way you knew to keep your dignity while uncertain of their intentions? They had believed you would speak clearly if you truly cared. But what if you had once believed the same thing about them? The stranger watched realization move through your soulmate's face. Then she said, "Now you understand why I told you to stay away." Your soulmate looked confused again. "No," they said. "I don't." The woman replied, "Because if one sentence from a stranger can make you abandon someone you feel this strongly about, then you were never ready to know who they really are." Silence. A deep, complete silence. That was the moment your soulmate realized the warning had never actually been about leaving you. It had been about revealing their own uncertainty. The stranger had pressed directly against the weakest part of their trust, and their heart had responded faster than their fear. Your soulmate asked, almost impatiently now, "Then who are they?" The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she asked for your first name. Your soulmate hesitated. Everything about the conversation had become too strangely accurate. For a moment, they considered ending it there. But curiosity had already become something stronger. They wanted to hear what came next. So they told her. Your name entered the conversation. And when it did, the stranger's entire expression changed. Not dramatically. Not fearfully. Something subtler. Recognition without familiarity. She repeated your name once, softly, almost as if testing how it felt in the air. Then she became silent. Your soulmate waited. A few seconds passed. Then more. The stranger looked down, and for the first time since the conversation began, she seemed unsure how to continue. This unsettled your soulmate. They asked, "What?" The woman shook her head. Your soulmate asked again, "What is it?" Still, she did not answer. Something was different now. Until that point, the stranger had spoken calmly and confidently. Every observation had come quickly. But after hearing your name, she seemed to be choosing her words with unusual care. Then she whispered, "That makes sense." Your soulmate's pulse quickened. What makes sense? The woman looked at them and said, "Why you couldn't accept the warning." Your soulmate leaned forward slightly. The stranger continued, "You think you are drawn to this person because of what they make you feel. But I think there is another reason." Your soulmate asked what reason. The woman said, "Recognition." That word landed strangely. Recognition. Not familiarity. Not attraction. Not curiosity. Recognition. As though something inside your soulmate had identified something inside you before either of you understood what was happening. The stranger explained that sometimes a person appears in your life and feels unusually familiar, not because you literally remember them from somewhere, but because they awaken qualities, truths, and possibilities you have been searching for without knowing how to name them. Their presence exposes what you have been settling for. Their absence reveals what you valued. Their silence forces you to confront what you were too afraid to say when you had the chance. Your soulmate's thoughts became loud. They remembered the first moments they felt unusually aware of you. They remembered conversations that seemed ordinary at the time but returned to their mind much later. They remembered wondering why your opinion mattered more than it should have. They remembered noticing when you became distant. They remembered checking for signs that you still cared without wanting you to know they were checking. And then the stranger said something that caused your soulmate to look away. You have already imagined losing them. They did not answer. The stranger continued, and the thought hurt more than you expected. Still no answer. Because it was true. Your soulmate had imagined a future where you simply stopped reaching emotionally. Where you found peace elsewhere. Where someone else eventually understood the parts of you they had been too hesitant to approach. Where your attention no longer turned toward them. Where the connection became nothing more than a memory they occasionally revisited while wondering what might have happened if they had been braver. That possibility had affected them Deeply. More deeply than they wanted to admit. The stranger saw it. Then she said, "That is why you're here having this conversation instead of walking away." Your soulmate finally asked, "What do you think they are to me?" The woman smiled gently. "I didn't say I know what they are to you." Your soulmate frowned. She continued, "I said I think I know who they are." And that was the sentence that changed everything. Your soulmate's breathing slowed. The noise around them seemed to disappear. The stranger looked directly at them and began speaking differently now, almost carefully, as if she knew the next words would remain long after the conversation ended. She said, "This person is someone who has rebuilt themselves more times than people realize." Your soulmate listened. They have had moments when they questioned their own worth because people they valued failed to recognize it. Your soulmate's eyes softened. They learned that being loyal does not guarantee loyalty in return. Something inside your soulmate hurt. They learned that caring deeply can make you vulnerable in ways strength cannot prevent. The stranger paused. And still, they did not lose the ability to love. Your soulmate looked down. The stranger continued, "That is rarer than you think." Something about those words reached your soulmate differently. They began thinking about every moment when you could have become colder but chose kindness instead. Every moment when you could have played games but chose distance. Every moment when you could have demanded attention but instead waited quietly to see whether sincerity would come without force. The stranger said, "People may mistake their boundaries for pride. They may mistake their silence for indifference.